In this podcast, you'll learn what it means to be intelligent and some synonyms for intelligent like wise, astute, quick-witted, and savvy, so that you can widen your vocabulary and sound more intelligent. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with about 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you, Craig?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's lovely to see you again and a pleasure to be podcasting with you. How was your week?
It's been a nice week because we had a holiday this week. It was May Day. That's the 1st of May. I think they call it Labor Day in America. Is that right?
Yes.
So it was nice to have a day off. What about you?
Yep, it's wonderful weather. We've been enjoying the weather over here in Valencia and we're keen to get on with the podcast this week. We hope you're doing well and we know Carmen is doing well. Carmen is our first voice message today and she's from Almeria in Spain originally, but she's now living in Switzerland. And Carmen speaks about learning a language through immersion.
Hi, Reza and Craig. I'm Carmen from Almeria, Spain. This is the first time I send you a message. I've been listening to your podcast for a month now, and I think you guys, you are amazing. I'm trying to improve my English because I would like to feel more confident when I travel around the world or using my daily life. I live in Switzerland and people here usually speak French, but there are a lot of English speakers. So I would like to be able to communicate with everyone here. I'm working on my English skills with a private teacher and also with online resources. Of course, I listen to your podcast every day and I love it. In my opinion, the best way to learn a language is to do an immersion experience. And that's why I'm looking for a school in the USA or in England to spend a month improving my English. However, it's very complicated to choose between the different options. Do you have any advice for learning English abroad as an adult, or do you recommend any specific country or city? Thanks again for your amazing work and see you soon. Ciao, guys.
Well, thank you, Carmen. It's lovely to hear you, a first-time caller, long-time listener. So thanks for sending in your voice message. And one interesting thing I noticed about your accent, Carmen, is that although you are from Spain, I did notice a kind of a little French way of pronouncing some of the words. Did you notice that, Reza?
I did. Maybe the French influence, which you mentioned in your part of Switzerland where you are, is beginning to rub off on you. That means you're beginning to adopt it. I would say the same as Craig. If I didn't know you were Spanish, I might have thought you were French.
I want to emphasize that's not a negative thing, Carmen. You speak very clearly. We understood everything you said, and you have a very pleasant, very nice way of speaking English. If you are interested in improving conversation online, you might be interested in my conversation course that is weekly on Zoom. So it's not immersion where you travel to spend time with me physically, but I do connect with a small group of lovely students every week and we practice conversation on Zoom. So if that's something that appeals to you or to anybody listening who has a B2 or a C1 level, then contact me, Craig, at inglespodcast.com, and I'll send you more details. The only thing I would say about immersion courses is think very carefully where you go. Now, you mentioned America, the US, you mentioned England. If you're interested in museums and culture and theatre and concerts and action and clubs, go to London or a big city. But if you're more interested in meeting local people and engaging more in a smaller community, maybe go to a part of the UK, for example, that's not so popular. First of all, it will be cheaper. You won't spend as much money in accommodation and probably English classes, but also I think the people will be more open and friendlier in those smaller communities. What do you think, Reza?
Exactly the same as you, Craig. And if you go to a big city like London or maybe even Dublin, if you went to Ireland, there's a fair chance that most of the friends and acquaintances you meet will be other foreigners. It's a bit harder to get to know locals well in a big city. It's easier in a smaller city. And the last thing you want to do is spend all your free time with Spanish speakers, because you will inevitably end up speaking Spanish. And although that may be comfortable, it's not going to help your English.
And one more thing I would say, I can't recommend any particular school or place of study personally, but I would suggest that you go to a host family for your accommodation so that you're interacting and speaking with a family that lives in the area. That's much more useful than staying in a hotel, for example.
Another thing to consider perhaps is the accent of where you're going to live. Bear in mind that native speakers have their own accent, and do a little bit of internet research. Watch some YouTube clips or similar videos about people from that area. If you decide to go to Glasgow, for example, they're not going to speak the same as people were going to speak to you in Oxford or in Bristol or in Belfast. They all speak in their own way. Bear that in mind.
Okay, let's focus on the main topic for this week, and that's intelligence, which in my dictionary says the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills, learning from experience. But there are different types of intelligence, aren't there? And it's not really easy sometimes to pigeonhole or classify intelligence as one particular thing.
Yes, indeed. Sometimes you hear the word intelligence used, but sometimes it's referring to military intelligence. For example, it's very typical to hear a politician, might even be a president, say something like, according to our intelligence, forces of the army of such and such a country are gathered at the border, possibly ready to attack. Well, it's not that you're really intelligent because you know that. The use of intelligence there refers specifically to military intelligence. In other words, information which the army have collected. Quite often we just call that intelligence. Really, it should be military intelligence, but quite often the word military is dropped and you just hear intelligence.
And if you think about intelligence in a more wider or broader sense, you have, for example, spatial awareness, which is a kind of intelligence. For example, some people know how to pack boxes in the boot of a car. The boot is the back of the car. Some people are very good at that, and naturally they know how to do it. And some people are terrible at doing that. And nature, if you look at farmers, for example, they have a particular intelligence that's connected to the weather and things growing and cultivating crops, etc. There's musical intelligence, there's words and literature. So there's lots of different areas of intelligence. It's not just one specific thing.
It's funny you should mention that, Craig. I've just remembered Gardner's theory. It's a theory which talks about the different types of intelligence. So who's to say that somebody who's terrible at mathematics isn't intelligent? They might be fantastic at music, for example. And this person, Howard Gardner, he came up with a theory, him and other people, but he gets the credit mostly for it. And it's fairly universally recognized, though not everyone accepts it. And he divided intelligence into different categories. He talked about naturalistic, musical, bodily, kinesthetic. That means being intelligent with your body, knowing how to move it. Logical, mathematical, interpersonal, dealing with other people. intrapersonal, I-N-T-R-A, intra, dealing with yourself, understanding yourself, knowing how to deal with your own feelings. Linguistic, obviously Craig and I are interested in that in the podcast. And spatial. So those are the 7 types of intelligence which Gardner identified. And of course, now we know we're more flexible. 100 years ago, people weren't so flexible. You can be incredibly intelligent in one area and be an absolute dunce. That means the opposite of intelligent in another. Like, I'm really pretty bad at mathematics, but I'm not bad at music, and I'm okay at linguistic things. What about you, Craig?
Well, I'm really pleased to hear about Gardner's theory, because I always thought I wasn't intelligent because I'm stupid at maths and physics. That's my weak point. I've never been good with numbers. But to hear that doesn't necessarily mean I'm not intelligent is very pleasing. I'm happy about that. Yeah. I also think being street smart is very important. Having practical intelligence, or maybe just common sense, just knowing what's a logical thing to do and not to do, being street smart.
And would you say that a lot of people who are clearly very, very intelligent, like rocket scientists, people who know how to send spaceships to the moon, quite often they aren't that street smart? So a guy might know all about the necessary physics and mechanics to construct a NASA spaceship, but, leave him in the streets of, Harlem for a couple of hours and he'll get into big trouble.
Yeah.
He won't know how to defend himself.
Yeah, being intelligent and being that clever doesn't necessarily translate to common sense. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're a smart cookie. A smart cookie. No, I'm not talking about biscuits. Well, I am talking about biscuits.
For once, you're not talking about biscuits?
If you're a smart cookie, then you are clever. You're intelligent. You're quick. And as sharp as a tack. What does that mean, as sharp as a tack? It's a simile.
A tack it looks a bit like a nail that you would put on a wall, to hold things up. You put a picture on top of the nail, or to make a hole in something, a piece of wood, you put a nail in. But with a tack, it's more for paper, isn't it? You put it through paper. So it kind of looks like a nail, but it's not as big, and you put it through paper. So it needs to be sharp to be able to go through the paper. So if you're as sharp as a tack, it means your brain is sharp. It can cut. It's sharp. So if you're a sharp thinker, you're as sharp as a tack, you're intelligent.
And the opposite, of course, is not to be sharp. And if you have a sharp knife, it cuts very easily. And the opposite of sharp is blunt. So you could say that he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, which means he's not very clever, he's not very bright, he's not very quick, or he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. The shed is the small building at the end of the garden where you keep your tools. So those expressions are describing people who are not smart cookies. And the word tack, T-A-C-K, is more of an American word. I think in British English we'd say drawing pin. But that doesn't work with this expression. You would not say he's as sharp as a drawing pin. It doesn't work. So the expression is, he's as sharp as a tack. Very quick, very clever.
Now, Craig may not be a qualified food critic, nor am I. But when it comes to biscuits, he knows his onions. Am I confusing you?
Onion biscuits?
Not onion biscuits.
Disgusting.
Craig, I imagine you don't know that much about onions, neither do I, but you do know a lot about biscuits. So when it comes to biscuits, Craig knows a lot. He knows his onions. The expression to know your onions doesn't mean that you're an expert in onions. It simply means that you know what you're talking about. You are intelligent as regards that topic. So when it comes to biscuits and chocolate, Craig knows his onions.
My greengrocer knows his onions. Completely ruined that joke, didn't I? My greengrocer knows his onions. Bright, the adjective, B-R-I-G-H-T, to be bright, is to be clever. If you're a bright girl, you're very, very clever. And we describe light as being bright, and the opposite is dim, D-I-M. So if the light is dim, then you can't see properly. And similarly, if you describe a person as being dim, that means they're not very clever. So bright and dim, used for light and for intelligence.
Another word used to describe people who are very bright is brilliant. You can have a brilliant mind. That means it's really sharp, it's bright, it's quick. You could be a brilliant student. You get top grades all the time.
Another word used to describe intelligence is astute. A-S-T-U-T-E. Remember, these words, you can see these words in the show notes to this episode. Go to inglespodcast.com/467. Astute also means very clever, very intelligent. He's an astute businessman, for example. Or Reza's astute handling of the emergency situation in the classroom made the students very happy.
Another word which we could say is similar to intelligent is perceptive, but it's not exactly the same. If you're perceptive, that means your powers of perception are good. That means you're able to perceive, you're able to understand things quickly and well. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you know a lot about a lot of things. You could just be good at reading the situation. It was often said in the past, perhaps not so much now, because it might be labeled as sexist, that women were more perceptive than men. They're quicker at understanding the situation, of knowing what they need to know. Would you say women are more perceptive, Craig?
In some ways, yes. I think they are more perceptive, but I think it depends on what area you're talking about. Another example, drugs can change your perception of reality. There's the noun there, perception. The verb is to perceive the situation. Shrewd is another word that refers to intelligence. S-H-R-E-W-D is the adjective, and the noun is shrewdness. Do you think, Reza, Bitcoin is a shrewd investment?
Not in the least.
Why not?
I think it's a crazy investment because there's nothing to back it up. For me, shrewd means that something is well calculated. If you've made a shrewd decision, you've thought of the risks, you've thought of the gains, you've calculated what you should do, and you act on your calculations. That is shrewd. I don't think Bitcoin is, do you? Are you a fan of Bitcoin?
I haven't bought any, but I'm thinking about it because I don't know. If you think that money is just an agreement of trust in a system, then why is the banking system necessarily more stable than Bitcoin?
Maybe it isn't, but the only people I know who have Bitcoin have lost money. It's not worth as much as what they paid for. I know people who have it. It's worth less than what they paid for.
Doesn't it depend when they bought it?
I guess it does, but when they bought it, it was worth more than that. That's the point.
They obviously weren't very shrewd.
Yeah.
Or perceptive.
But I understand that Bitcoin is effectively a company. It's not a government, right?
No, it's not. It's not a company either.
But someone has to control it. It's not like an idea. It's not like gravity. It doesn't just exist. It's got to be a company.
It's not owned by anybody.
You would trust a money, a currency that's not owned by anybody? I trust the dollar because it's backed up by the American government. But Bitcoin?
Good luck trusting the American government.
No, I don't trust the American government. I trust the dollar because it's backed by the American government. Do you know what I mean? The American government, when it comes to financial institutions, they have a fairly good reputation. Compare them to the Cambodian government, for example. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I trust the American banking system in 2008.
More than the Cambodian one, I insist. Yeah, but no, they're terrible flaws they've made. But Bitcoin is it could close. What if we close? It's like, very sorry, we have to close. And all the money? Yeah, as I say, we have to close. Cheerio.
But money is the same thing. The only reason we agree that a dollar's worth a dollar is because we believe that piece of, and it's not even paper anymore, it's just numbers in a computer. The only reason you believe you've got the money in your bank is because you hope that if you go to your bank one day and ask for all your money, they're going to give it to you. Although few months ago, they tried that in Beirut and the banks closed and the people didn't get their money because it just wasn't there. They'd reinvested it somewhere else and they didn't have it. Yeah. So it's only trust that your money, you think your money is in the bank,
yeah.
But if everybody thinks it is and goes the same day to get it, it's not there.
Indeed, as happened in America in 1929, I get it, but it doesn't happen often in America.
No, it doesn't happen often.
I wouldn't invest my money in Beirut unless I was Lebanese and had no choice. But you know, the American government can't close. Bitcoin can close if they want. They can just close. The American government can't say, yeah, there's no American government anymore. Cheers. Bye-bye. Thanks for all your support in the past. You know, the American government goes on. Might be a bad government, but it doesn't just close. But Bitcoin or Amazon, shock horror, could say, guess what? We're closing Amazon. Very unlikely with the money they make, but they could if they wanted, right? And Bitcoin will close if it means that the owners avoid losing loads of money. They would close, I'm sure. They just say we're no longer running as a company.
Who would say that? It's not that no one is in charge of Bitcoin. There's no hierarchy.
Then how do you know you're going to ever get your money then? Who's responsible for giving you your money?
You're responsible for remembering your password, and it's on blockchain. So blockchain is a computer system that's calculated Bitcoin. So you've got a percentage of a Bitcoin, and that's your money, and you access it by using a code. But as long as you remember that code, you'll always have that Bitcoin. Whether or not it will be worth the same as it was worth last year, you don't know. But then it's the same with the banking system as well.
That's true.
And the mortgage.
Yeah.
And interest rates fluctuate as well.
I guess so. What if it gets hacked? I mean, if the CIA can be hacked, and they were by the Russians recently, I'm sure Bitcoin can be hacked.
And so can your bank.
Yeah. But you have a record, if you have any sense, by keeping receipts from your bank of your last transaction. So they get hacked, but you say, well, I didn't make any other transaction but this, and here's my proof.
And the bank says, well, I'm sorry, everything's been hacked and we can't give you the money because somebody's stolen it.
Yeah, could happen.
Nothing's 100%.
Yeah, it's true, but I don't trust Bitcoin now. I'm not going to be convinced.
Another adjective to describe a person who is funny, clever, who can reply in a very amusing way without thinking too long, is quick-witted. Reza is a very quick-witted man. He is humorous and he answers with humor, and his comments are intelligent. He's a very quick-witted person.
I don't know if that's true. Craig is a good flatterer, someone who flatters, someone who says the things you want to hear.
Am I a gifted flatterer?
Very gifted. He's gifted. In other words, he has been mentally blessed with the ability to flatter, F-L-A-T-T-R, to say nice things that you want to hear. Because I wouldn't say I'm that quick-witted. When I think of quick-witted people, I think of people like Oscar Wilde, who was known to be able to say something funny about anything at the drop of a hat. I wish I had that ability, Craig, but I'm not sure I do.
What does at the drop of a hat mean?
At the drop of a hat means without any planning, instantly. So Oscar Wilde was quick-witted. Reza, I'm not sure. I wish I was.
Gifted often collocates with words like dancer, doesn't it? Or footballer. He's a very gifted footballer. He's got a lot of skill. She's a very gifted musician. She plays the flute very well. Or she's a very gifted dancer.
I guess then the word gifted can collocate with any of the intelligences that we mentioned from Gardner's system.
Yes, a gifted mathematician, a gifted physician.
A gifted musician, gifted dancer. So it doesn't have to be purely the traditional scientific subjects. It can be the dancing, the linguistic things, the music. You can be gifted at all of those things.
Apart from being quick-witted and a gifted teacher, Reza is also very knowledgeable about many things. Knowledge is the noun and knowledgeable is the adjective. A knowledgeable person. Reza's very knowledgeable about grammar, for example.
Actually, you know what? I'm going to accept that my knowledge of grammar isn't bad. Although I know people who know a lot more than me, but I'm very knowledgeable about things that I don't need to know about. But my knowledge is lacking in things I should know about. That's my problem. In other words, my mind is full of trivia. So, yeah, I have a lot of useless knowledge up there.
So then maybe you wouldn't say that you were savvy, savvy, because savvy tends to describe a person who has a lot of practical knowledge and experience about a certain thing. For example, you could be media savvy, which means you know a lot about the media, or tech savvy, to know a lot about technology, or business savvy. You know a lot about business.
And I think, Craig, you're pretty tech savvy. You know quite a lot about technical things, I would say.
I don't know. Everything's relative. I don't know. I don't think I know a lot compared to somebody who works in IT. But maybe I know something about technology if you put me in a room with maybe other language teachers or poets or people of other professions. So I think it's very relative depending on who you're with.
Craig, would you say that you or anyone you know is wise?
Yes, I know some wise people, and the people I know who are wise, they tend to be older, because I think wisdom, and that's the noun, wisdom, if you have a lot of wisdom, if you're a wise person, then you tend to make good decisions and good judgments because your knowledge is based on experience and the knowledge you've accumulated during your life. You made a wise choice listening to this podcast, for example.
My mum taught me about wisdom when I was a kid, and what she told me was good, but I probably didn't pay as much attention as I should have. An owl is a bird, right? Un búho. And here's what my mum said about wisdom. The wise old owl lived in the oak.
Which is a tree.
Uh-huh. The wise old owl lived in the oak. The more he heard, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Now, wasn't he a wise old bird?
I like that. That's nice.
She's pretty much got it there, hasn't she?
She has, because there's a reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Ah, I like it.
Because we should listen twice as often as we speak. On the ball is our next expression, Reza. Does that mean the person is knowledgeable about football if they're on the ball?
If they're on the ball about football, it could be. You can be on the ball about anything. If you're on the ball, it simply means you know what you're talking about, you're well informed, you know everything that you need to know. So you can be on the ball about certain things, like Craig is very much on the ball about the latest tendencies in podcasting, but forgive me if I suggest you're probably not on the ball as regards the latest tendencies in women's fashion.
Definitely not. No. It also means to be alert to certain things. For example, I'm not really on the ball today on this podcast because I didn't sleep very well last night, so I'm feeling tired. I'm not really on the ball. I'm not alert.
And Craig, as regards European politics, would you say you're clued up?
Clued up? No, I'm not. I don't have a clue. I'm not clued up. I don't have any detailed knowledge about European politics, although I think you're quite clued up when it comes to European politics because you've been teaching some of it, haven't you?
Well, I'm far from an expert, but it's true that I've been given a course in English for the European Union, so I suppose I'm more on the ball than I was a while back, but I'm still not 100% clued up. But I'm getting there. My knowledge is growing.
There's another expression, to have a good head on your shoulders. To have a good head on your shoulders. And that also means you're quite aware and intelligent and knowledgeable about a certain thing. And it comes from the early 1500s. The expression used to be to have an old head on young shoulders. So to know about things is to have a good head on your shoulders. We're looking for an enthusiastic young assistant who has a good head on their shoulders.
Craig, what would you understand if I said to you, he knows what's what?
What? What's what?
That's right. I said the word what twice. Well, with is in the middle. He knows what's what.
He knows what's what. That means he knows things. He knows the situation. He's perceptive. He knows what's going on.
My sister has a little plaque in her kitchen, which I find very amusing. Every time I go to her house to visit her, I see it. And it basically says the following. Would you like to speak to the man in charge or the woman who knows what's what? It says that in the flag. So yeah, a man in charge. Who gets the job as boss? A man. But is he really on the ball? Is he really clued up? No, it'll be a woman who actually knows what's happening, but she won't be called the boss. So would you like to speak to the man in charge or the woman who knows what's what?
I would change that slightly and say, would you like to speak to the man who thinks he is in charge? That's probably more accurate. The man who wears the trousers. And another expression connected to intelligence is to know a thing or two about something. That's a very common colloquial expression. If you know a lot, then you know a thing or two about something. For example, Reza knows a thing or two about music. He studied music. Reza knows a thing or two about literature and general knowledge. So it's quite an understatement, isn't it? You say a thing or two, but you really mean a lot. You know a lot about the subject.
Craig knows a thing or two about biscuits.
And Reza knows a thing or two about making a good cup of tea. Now, we mentioned the word smart before, meaning intelligent or quick-witted. But there is an expression that means the opposite, isn't there, Reza, using the word smart?
Well, I wouldn't say exactly the opposite, but it's certainly a negative thing. If somebody says you're smart, that's a compliment. That's a good thing. But if somebody says you're a smart ass in American English or smart arse in British English, that's not a good thing. They're saying that you're someone who thinks you're smart, but in fact, you are just irritating. So you might say comments, you might try to show off your knowledge, but instead of impressing people, you irritate them. You are a smart arse.
And I think at one time or another, we've all come across a couple of smart asses at work or at school or wherever. Smart asses, yeah. We all know one or two smart asses.
And remaining low down there on the bottom, or posterior, another expression with the ass or arse. You can imagine it's going to be negative again if it's to do with our bottoms. If you don't know your ass from your elbow or your arse from your elbow, that means you're stupid. You are not intelligent. You are unintelligent. So Peter's really dumb. He doesn't know his ass from his elbow. He's stupid. He is not intelligent.
Let's look at some phrasal verbs connected to intelligence. If you want to solve or understand something, you can use the phrasal verb to figure out, which is more American English usage, or to work out, which is more British English. For example, I need to figure out a way to solve this maths problem. Or, I need to work out a way to solve this maths problem.
We've been talking about perception. If you pick up on something, another phrasal verb with two prepositions, we got up and on, pick up on something, is to notice or perceive something. For example, she, a woman of course, she picked up on the subtle clues and solved the mystery. She picked up on them. They weren't obvious, but she perceived them. She picked up on the clues.
Reza, did you pick up on the fact that I've lost some weight?
I hadn't actually, Craig. No, I'm sorry. How much weight have you lost?
I haven't, actually. That's why you didn't pick up on it, because I haven't lost any weight. Another phrasal verb is to think through. Through, T-R-O-U-G-H. Be careful of the pronunciation. Through. Think through, which means to consider something carefully and thoroughly. Let me give you an example. Before making a decision, you need to think through all the possible consequences. And it's sometimes, well, quite usually used in the negative. For example, my friend had the idea of selling hot soup in Valencia in July and August when it's really, really hot in the middle of the summer. He didn't think it through. He really didn't think that idea through.
It could be worse. There's another example often used to demonstrate how people didn't think things through. If he had tried to sell snow to Eskimos, that's a common one. Eskimos don't need any extra snow, do they? So if somebody says to you, you didn't think this through, it's like selling snow to the Eskimos. Of course nobody's going to do it.
There is a scale which measures intelligence. It's called the Binet-Simon scale. Two French psychologists, Binet and his student Simon, they created in the early 1900s an IQ test. And this IQ stands for intelligence quotient. It's one of the most widely known and used measure for finding out and determining an individual's intelligence. Have you ever taken an IQ test, Reza?
I don't think I have. I think I received one, but I didn't bother to do it. I was too frightened to see the result. What about you?
No, I haven't either, but I did go over to the website and try the Mensa IQ test. MENSA is an association that measures IQs, and I started doing the test and then I gave up in the middle, but it is quite interesting. I will put a link in the show notes if you want to try and measure your IQ. Go to inglespodcast.com/467 and you will probably score between 70 and 130 on this IQ test, because that represents 95% of the population. Although there are some extreme examples of people exceeding 130. For example, did you know that William James Sidis has the highest IQ in the world? It's somewhere between 250 and 300. That's higher than Stephen Hawking, and twice as intelligent, or twice the score, as Einstein. He speaks 25 languages, this guy, and he was admitted into Harvard University at 11 years old. A clever guy, very smart.
Clever guy. I've got a question though. How many girlfriends has he had? That's the downside, isn't it? If you're a bit too book smart rather than street smart, quite often if you're a man, you're not so successful with the ladies. Do you think that cliche is true?
I think it's possibly true. I don't know him personally, but it wouldn't surprise me if most of the time his head is buried in a book instead of being buried in something else. So yeah, a high IQ, probably nice to have, but not everything in life.
In fact, you've just reminded me, there's a quotation, I think something like this, from George Orwell. As you know, I'm a big fan. I think he's got some great quotations. And he was asked, if you could have any ability, if you could change yourself in any way, what power would you like to have? And this is somebody who was very interested in politics. He kind of predicted the big brother future of us all being monitored quite accurately, etc. And he simply said, I would like to be totally irresistible to all women on earth. That was the one power he wanted to have. Quite interesting. What about, not bad, eh? Not bad thought.
Very astute. Very astute. Speaking of people who are astute and quick-witted, Albert Einstein is quoted as saying, intelligence is not the ability to store information, but to know where to find it.
I like that. That's good.
Just go to Mr. Google.
Yeah, but Mr. Google's not there whenever you need him. Whereas if you can find that information in your own brain, if you know, because we've all got information in our own brain, but we can't access it. It's like our brain is the hard drive, but we don't know the route to get to it sometimes, but it's there somewhere, right? People who know the route to get there, they're the smart people.
Yes, but aren't we in the information age where we don't need to store things in our heads anymore? If you think how crazy that is with the computing power that we have in our mobile phone now. Why would we want to try to remember things if it's on our phone?
That's true. That's true. But even knowing where it is on your phone in itself is a kind of skill. Knowing how to store things itself is a skill. I mean, I have loads of things on my phone, but I never remember where they are. So that doesn't really do me much good. I think Einstein's really nailed it when he said you have to know how to quickly access the information. That's the key.
And it's really important to know where your phone is, not lose it.
Which I don't know. Usually I've got to get someone to call me so I know where my phone is. So bad start.
Einstein also said, he was a clever guy, wasn't he, Einstein? The difference between stupidity and genius is that genius has its limits and stupidity doesn't.
I've got another quotation which some of you will know. I knew it, but what I didn't know was that it was so old. It goes way back to the year 1711. It's this: a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. In fact, the original quotation said a little learning is a dangerous thing, but in modern times we tend to say a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And Alexander Pope said that. What do you think he meant by that, Craig? How can a little knowledge be a dangerous thing? Is it not a good thing to have knowledge?
Well, you think you know things and then you take action based on what you know. But if you don't know enough, you might take the wrong action and make a mistake. So the more knowledge you have, the better position you are in to make a good decision. So just accumulate as much knowledge about something as possible and then make your decision based on the knowledge you've managed to accumulate. What's interesting about that quote is the fact that knowledge is uncountable. So a little knowledge is a dangerous thing.
Craig, do you think going to school makes a person more intelligent?
It could do. I mean, if you go to school, you're getting knowledge and you're acquiring knowledge and you're learning stuff, and then you need to know how to apply it in life and use the skills you're learning. I think there are many, many problems with the education system, but it is a place of learning, so it's a good thing to learn, isn't it? What do you think?
Yeah. I think you definitely need to go to school to make the most of your own intelligence. Although, let's be honest, some people are more intelligent than others in certain areas. But I think by going to school and meeting other people, that can help you bring out your natural ability. I think if you never go to school, you're not going to make the most of it.
Yeah. I also think it's important to remember that if you're a creative person, you might necessarily not have your needs met at school, because I think school likes to put you in particular boxes and give you a particular label and send you along a particular road, whereas maybe your creativity might lead you to a different place. So yes, it's a good place to start, but don't let the school restrict your choices in life.
Right.
Reza, what insults your intelligence?
I really dislike being told how to do my job by people who have no knowledge of it. That bothers me. Sometimes I say to people, oh, I'm a teacher, I teach English, and very soon they're saying, well, in class, have you ever tried blah, blah, blah? And this is someone who has never taught a class before in their lives. And they say, oh, you should really do this, do the other. They give me lots of pointers about things I should do. And it turns out this person is sells insurance. I would never say to an insurance man, oh, you sell insurance, why don't you try this? I wouldn't give them advice. I don't know how to do it. And it kind of bothers me when non-experts try to tell you how to do your job. That bothers me.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of being talked down to. If somebody talks down to you, then they are making you feel small by telling you things, and you know that they don't have the knowledge, the background knowledge to give you good advice. Reza, do you think there's a connection between intelligence and happiness?
Yes. I think the dumber you are, the more chance there is of being happy.
Really?
Yes.
So the opposite to what most people would think.
Oh, could be, yeah. They say ignorance is bliss. Bliss is paradise, heaven. I believe it. The less you know, the less you can be bothered, is my philosophy.
So what you're saying is don't watch the news, don't read books.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that I envy people who don't know about a lot of the bad stuff that goes on in the world. I'm not saying I want to be like them, but in a way I envy them. They don't suffer. I genuinely believe that the less you know, the less there is to trouble you. It's a catch-22. I like knowing about things. I don't want to be in the dark. I want to be clued up. But the more clued up you are, the more there is to depress you. It's like that, isn't it? It's true though, isn't it? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I've been to some poor countries where people really don't have hardly anything, but they do have enough food and they have a roof over their head and they have a strong community and family around them and they're very happy. But they don't have a big plasma TV. They don't have to worry about car insurance. They don't have the problems that we have in Europe, for example, but they're very, very happy. So I don't think there's a connection.
And Craig, what about friendship? What do you value most in a friend? Is it intelligence? Do you like your friends to be intelligent? Or is it kindness or honesty, or what is it?
That's a good question. I've never thought about that. I think neither of those I would put first. I would put first a friend that's there in times of need, that supports you when you need support. But if I had to choose between those three, I'd probably go for kindness and then honesty. I don't think intelligence. It's nice to have an intelligent friend, to have intelligent conversations with, but I think kindness is a better value. What do you think?
Totally agree. For me, it's a no-brainer.
A no-brainer.
Yeah.
An easy conclusion.
Easy, kindness. Yeah. For me, I don't particularly want the friendship of an evil genius. I'd far rather have a kind, dumb person. Dumb is a kind of old-fashioned way of saying not very clever. Yeah. Give me the kind person any day.
So we agree on that one. A lot of people, well, everybody seems to be talking about AI, artificial intelligence these days. In fact, we spoke about it on podcast 241. Go to inglespodcast.com/241 to listen to our opinions on AI. Can that replace human intelligence, do you think?
I think it is, and it will be used more and more in place of humans. But can it 100% completely, totally replace human intelligence? I believe not. But to a certain extent, yes. What do you think?
I think it will. I think we're very close.
100%, but 100%.
Yes, it will pass us. It will pass us. If we're basing intelligence on what we've been talking about on this podcast, about being smart, about being skilled in certain things, about rationalizing using logic and intelligence, yes, AI will pass us. Yeah. What do you think, though? Do you agree with Reza on AI, or do you agree with me? What will happen? Will machines be more intelligent than humans in 5 or 10 years' time? And what do you think about the other opinions that we've offered on intelligence in this podcast? We'd love to hear from you. How shrewd and astute do you think you are? And do you know your onions? Let us know. Go to speakpipe.com, speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. Reza, how can people reach us by email?
You could write to us. You'll get Craig if you write to craig@inglespodcast.com or me, belfastreza@gmail.com.
And this podcast is sponsored in part by mansioningles.com. You can see products for Mansion Ingles by visiting the online store. Go to store.mansioningles.net. And thank you to Mansion Ingles for sponsoring this podcast. We'd also like to thank our Patreon sponsors. You too can be a Patreon sponsor and support this podcast. Why don't you go and have a look at our Patreon program on patreon.com/Ingles podcast, where for only $1.50 per month, you can have the lovely feeling of supporting this podcast every week. And you also get instant access to recent transcriptions so that you read every intelligent word that we say.
As Craig said, we'd like to thank all of those people who sponsor us on Patreon. It's quite a lot of people. but we just don't have time. So what we do is give a big thank you to the most recent sponsors who've just joined us this month, and they are Erasmo Melo, Raúl Antonio Gómez, Jorge Alberto Borda, Carmen Jiménez Acosta, Tomás J. Loto, Joan Carles Grau Bermejo, Merichel, Joseph, Pafo, Teresa Gil de Biedma, Jorge Juan Mañas, Justo, and a special thanks to Maria Madariaga, who's donating more than the $1.50 minimum. A big thank you to all those Patreon sponsors. Craig, what have we got on next week's episode?
We're not sure what we're going to be speaking about next week, and that's why we need your help. Do you have any ideas or suggestions for future shows? I'm sure you have a brilliant idea, so why not let us know? We will be back next week speaking about something that will help you with your English. Until next time, have a lovely week. See you soon. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends so that more people can listen. And we remind you that the music in this podcast is by Pitts, and the track is called See You Later.